Welcome to the Dixie Doggers podcast. We're here to share knowledge and heritage. We hope y'all enjoy. For the best cut gear in the business, get with Dave Williams at Southern Cross Cut Gear. Make sure to use code Dixie Doggers for savings on all your Southern Cross cut gear. www.hogdoggear.com.
If you're buying or selling land, farms, or hunting property, these folks know land. Get with Phil Wilson from Georgia Land Brokerage, 678-791-3483.
777 Kennels, Advanced K9 Nutrition. Vertex K9 Essentials, Advanced K9 Nutrition, beneficial to all breeds. You can contact them at 979-206-3050. All right, everybody. It's Joey Nate here with you. Another Dixie Dogger Show coming to you.
Yes, indeed.
We got a guest on with us today. He was recommended to us by another guest that we've had. And we got Mr. Jimbo Fausett on with us today. So, Mr. Jimbo, tell the world out there who you are, where you're from, and what kind of dogs you got. Just give us a rundown on what you do.
Well, I'm Jimmy Fausett. Everybody called me Jimbo around here, and ever since I was about 5 years old. And I'm from a little old community they call Huber, Texas. And I've been hunting quite a while now, since back in the 70s, early 70s, probably in around 73, 74. I went to hunted cur dogs mainly. Well, I tell you what, I hunted any kind of dog that run a hog back then.
Yes.
It didn't make no difference. If it was a feist, if he could find a hog, of course. Back then, the hogs weren't near as plentiful as they are today. But anyway, that's pretty much it. I started hunting with some boys up in Beckville. They came down. I say started hunting with them. They come down here because a friend of mine over here in Arcadia had started having some hog problems. And anyway, they came down. Actually, I was looking for a dog, and they came down and started kind of kicked it off and kind of got me excited about it. But they was always used to, hunting hogs in a river bottom that their grandpa had run hogs in the river bottom, and they had, groups of hogs down there that they kept fed and could call them up with a pickup horn, like
Yes.
a herd of cattle, And they were used to hunting them half. I don't know. They kept telling me that they wanted to come down here. They'd heard there was some Russian type hogs down here, and they came down here and what it was, we did have some Russian type hogs, but they were used to running domestic wild hogs.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't used to some of them pulling out and running for 30, 40 minutes,
Yes.
But back in the first, hogs, if you bait one, you caught him.
Yes, sir.
Nowadays, it's a little bit different for me now. Everybody may catch every one they run now. I don't know. But me, I don't. And I've never been able to do that. But back then, the old hogs, they didn't run as bad. They didn't. Well, matter of fact, there wasn't nobody around here hunting but me and a friend of mine down in the lower country down here in Sabine County. And but up around here, I was the only one that even hunted.
Really?
And back in, we hunted horseback, and which everything has changed up so much, dog wise, hog wise. The whole program is just different. You catch dogs. I'm sure these guys got some good catch dogs, but back then, we was catching lots of hogs and had some good, decent catch dogs. But we'd start, and most of the time, of course, everybody used to pick at me because here a while back we was gonna go hunting, and they hadn't been with me in a while, and they asked me what time you want to go? And I said, I don't know, 8, 9 o'clock. They said, we don't get up at 4 in the morning and leave out at 5. I said, what? No, I said, we don't do that. I ain't quite as mad at them as I used to be.
Mm.
But we used to, and there was a little market for a hog back then. Them old boars, if they brought $125 and I could catch 4 or 5 of them a week or
man.
3 of them a week, they'd pay electric bill.
Yeah.
And that's what I didn't make a whole lot of money, and about $300 a week is about all I made while I worked there 28 years and wasn't making much more than that when I finally moved on to something bigger and better. But them old hogs around here, for me, was one time I'd gathered up. I think I had 15 boars that weigh over 200, and they was about half of them weigh over 300. And my wife, she always stayed on me about them, they stunk and all this stuff. Matter of fact, where my house is sitting right now, it used to be a pen, a hog pen. And some guys come in there, people brought hogs from everywhere around here, and some guys out of Whiteface, Texas come in here and was buying hogs, and it was missing rain on Saturday morning, and there was a bunch of people that showed up bringing hogs, and these guys started weighing hogs, and I thought, Lord, as slow as they are, we'll be here all day, and I don't want to do this out in the rain because they have a shop down there, and we'd set their little old bookkeeping deal up down there where they could, kind of keep up with the books without getting wet. We fooled around, and I finally asked my wife, would she hang out with them and kind of help them out? We'd rush it up a little bit. Anyway, we got up there, and they wrote my check. And when they wrote my check and they signed it, and she called my name out for my check, and she said, "This is yours?" I said, "I hope so." The old boy said, "Yeah, that is, It was $4,700 or $4,800 for the boys. The hogs were bringing 54, 55 cents a pound,
Wow.
And we had, of course, I had more than just them big boars. I had a bunch of sows and stuff, and they were they processed that meat. They didn't, they were just buyers, but they processed that meat and sold it and shipped it somewhere. I don't know. All I knew is I got my $4,800. And
yeah.
my wife told me that them hogs didn't smell near as bad as
Ain't that the truth?
What they did 3 or 4 days before that. Of course, I'd had some of them long enough, that we had I worked at a feed store for 28 years, and we had a feed mill, and a lot of my old scrap feed and stuff, I could feed them, which helped me out a bunch, but mainly dead chickens.
Yes, sir.
Them dead chickens that make one roll, boy. I'm talking about, of course, I mean, it didn't take but one or two a day, and I'd come in from work and I could stop and pick up a trailer load, and when I made my round up through here, we lived in a trailer house, right, maybe 150 yards out in front of this house now. And anyway, you didn't have to, worry about no whole lot of feeding. Them old boars good and fat, and it got heavy, And
now, what years was this, Jimbo?
That's gonna be in the 80s, 85, 6, maybe.
Lord, $4,800 then. My God.
Yeah, that was a lot of money.
Yes, sir.
And it hadn't been probably a year before that. I had a blue dog, and a man kept on wanting, and I didn't want to get rid of him. And I sold him for $4,000, and that was in the 80s. So, that was a hog dog. That wasn't, I thought I'd done won the lottery or something, you know. I mean, but they bought that dog, and matter of fact, they bought that dog and wound up buying right at $10,000 worth of dogs off of me.
Wow.
And that was, to me, that was big money. Nowadays, I hear these dogs bringing a whole, or people asking a whole lot more for them, but I don't, I knew what that one dog was, and I had some more hounds, and I hardly ever sold a cur dog. Most of the time, I would sell hounds.
Really?
People in Arkansas, and matter of fact, there's a man. The man, he lived in Jones, Louisiana, which is right over the dadgum, I can't even think the man's name now, but anyway, he was a farmer up there, and he got hog hunting, I guess, on account of his crops and stuff, one thing, but he bought, I don't know, 4 or 5 plot dogs, a walker dog, and that blue dog. And of course, the blue dog, one of the plot dogs actually brought more than what the blue dog did, because I'd sold him a plot dog. And I don't know if this is what y'all want to hear or not, but I'm just telling you.
No, this is exactly what we want to hear.
There was I had a plot dog, and they called him Duffy, and I'd raised him from a puppy. And he was slow as smoke, but when you put him on the ground, you could go on to town, buy groceries, whatever you wanted to do, come back there. Wow, it'd be made somewhere. It might not be in this county, but he'd be made somewhere. But we had a hog band, is what it was, over at the rodeo arena in Center. And these folks come in here from Arkansas, the same ones that bought the blue dog and bought the plot dog, and they come in here, and Alan Everett was the man's name. And he told me that day, he said, I brought these boys back, said they want to buy a dog. I said, well, Mr. Allen, I hadn't got anything right now. He said, what about your walking dog? I said, I really don't want to get rid of him. He said, well, I'm going to tell you the truth. He said, these boys brought old Duffy back because quit hunting. Yeah. And one of them come, he said, there comes Teddy right yonder. He said, he's bringing old Duffy up here, let you look at him. Well, he was about a foot across the back. He was so fat he couldn't hardly walk, And it wasn't because he had quit hunting. It was because he couldn't, But anyway, they kept talking there. And finally I told him, I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. They give me $2,500 for old Duffy. And when the walking dog, I told him, I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take $3,000 for him. And they said, I'll tell you what we'll do. Said, no, it was $3,500, because they told me, we'll give you $3,000 and old Duffy back. Yeah, that's what it was, $3,000. So that made, old Duffy, the walker dog, one of them brought $5,500, so it was a pretty good deal there. But, I eventually wound up with, we took the dog the next day and caught 4 hogs with him, in some bad country. So, bless his heart, we put him on one of them show enough diets, and he couldn't, some dogs just can't hunt fat,
Yes,
and he was one of them. But other than that, that's been pretty much, we hunted this country here for years, and I hardly ever, we had some pens that, we'd gather up hogs and keep them in. Of course, some of the shoats and pigs get out, and back then it wasn't no big deal, Of course, there was lots of folks trying to keep these deer leases and stuff. They wanted some wild hogs. Well, we, they just didn't have, hogs are gonna go where they go.
Oh yeah.
You know, because they thought if they turned them out on their lease that, you know, that they'd be there. But, you know, and we had a place up in Panola County that we hunted. It was about 8,000 acres and had access to about 10,000 more. Probably the biggest area around here. Of course, you know, back then people didn't care. You know, they,
Yes.
you know, if I went up to people's house at 2 o'clock in the morning and tell them I got a hog tied up down here. I need to take him out, bring him out. And a lot of times people would go with me. You know, they'd want to go with me. But nowadays, there's a whole lot different around here.
Oh yeah.
You got to kind of keep it pretty tight around here, you know. And I, lots of people is, I got some dogs now. I ain't got any of the dogs I used to have. Uh, uh, and I know there's some boys around here that's got some good ones because I've been seeing lots of hogs being caught. But uh, my, I, everybody always asks me, did I cur dog better than hound? And I always told them I could find more back then. I could find more with a hound, but I caught more with a cur dog.
Yes, sir.
And because, you know, back then, you know, an old boar come through. It was a friend of mine down in the lower country. We'd, you know, we have, matter of fact, and this was verified, uh, of how many hours we have trailed a hog up that had been put on and bathed and he broke and run off. And anyway, the boys didn't get him. We put on him 19 hours later with old Duffy and a black and tan hound, and they trailed him through a clear cut. Now, I mean, they just didn't fall down there and start screaming and hollering and go to him.
Yes, sir.
You know, we had to help them every now and then. We'd search up a track for him and they'd hit it and go again. Because old Duffy, he had a pretty cold nose, and the black and tan, I've seen him blow ice out of track. You know, I mean, he's pretty cold nosed dog. You know, an old friend of mine lived in Alabama, Henderson Johnson. He said, I don't want one that'll smell him 12 hours old. I want him to smell him yesterday. You know, so so that's kind of the way them dogs was. But you know, we had some good car dogs. So we had, and you know, and then further on we went. And here in the last probably, I don't know, 10 years, everybody's had way better dogs than what I had. 'Cause I don't hunt there as much as I used to. I still go every time this swine turns a dog loose. I'll show enough go, but you know, because I love to go, and I'll fool around. Um, I've had back surgery here about 4 years ago, and I had to give them a boy's credit. They kept coming and get me. They'd get me up in the truck. They'd have to help me around, but you know, they gum. I couldn't help it. I had to go. You know, I thought I did anyway.
Yes, sir.
You know, but anyway, they it's just we, you know, back where I come from, they over nearly into Louisiana, and which I ain't too far from it now. I'm about 23 miles from it now, but you know, we hunted up and down that Sabine River for years, and I never could swim. You know, I never could swim, and that was one of the biggest deals with everybody. You know, we hunt that old big leash up there, and people would always tell us, and he can't swim. So if you get around water, you know, kind of watch him because he'll daggone. And I did a lot of times. I walked off in water, and a creek would be really, really deep, but it wouldn't be very wide, you know. And somebody, I used to dip snuff. I ain't dipped and smoked in 40 years, but they'd always make sure that my cigarettes and my snuff come up first because they know they didn't want to butt you. And, you know, when we got on the other side and I didn't have no snuff, you know, but we just, it's been you know, hog hunting has been just it was there for a long time. It wasn't, everybody used to ask me, why I took it so serious. And I used to do a little screaming and hollering at them boys, and about 95% of these hands around there that still hunt, you know, they started with me, and
Yes, sir.
and, and there's a lot of them uh, old Craig Oswald and Eric Perry and Kyle Bush. They was lots of them boys that started out with me, and and they did. Matter of fact, my preacher friend of mine just came here a while back. We went and caught one, and he used to preach. I had to go to the emergency room the other day. My potassium had got low, and the lady that was nursing me in there, uh, she went to Brother Chris's church, and anyway, she was talking, and she said, "I know you." She said, "Brother Chris used to preach on Sunday morning about you." I said, "Oh, man." But he first set of hobbles he ever seen. He he was it was a good hog too. It was a boar, and I was holding him, and I was ready to get a little relief, and I told him the hobbles, and he was trying to stick them two metal D rings back through each other, and of course I gave him pretty good butt chewing about that. Anyway, we got some hog tied up, and that was on Saturday. And that Sunday morning, he pulled a set of hobbles out of his jacket pocket and said, "I know you folks don't know what these are, but these are hobbles. You hobble a hog with them." And he said, "And these hobbles, I made it so hard for something simple, and that's the way we do in church.
Yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of you folks make everything so hard, and it could be so simple." But anyway, he hunted with me for several years, and there was a guy come out of Wisconsin and hunted with us one time, and one out of Idaho, and they was out here, and they called the wives, said, "Oh, don't worry about us. That we in good hands." This man even brought the preacher with him, so we all everybody had a big time. We all enjoyed hunting and and everything around him.
So,
And
what year would you say you started hunting, and how did you really get into it?
74. I was in 74, 73, 74, and in there. I was working at the feed store, like I said, and there was a man up in Panola County. His name was Daddy Harvey Briggs, and I told they had hog dogs, and his grandsons, which was the Coleman boys, and Bubba Coleman, Mike Coleman, and all that bunch. They had told me that if I need me a dog. I had two dogs come out of South Texas. They was half bulldog and half cur dog, two good looking dogs. I mean, they were just young, and me and my father-in-law went down on Toyat River and was just walking the dogs through the woods, and they jumped a hog and caught it. They didn't bait it; they caught it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little boar, weighed 150 pounds, but he was on the other side of the river. And anyway, we caught that hog, and from then on, Daddy Harvey Briggs, I went by his house. I was putting out fertilizer up there, and I went by Daddy Harvey's, and he told me he was telling me about how they trained their bulldogs and this, that, and the other. And I was telling him, I said, "Hey, Harvey," I said, "I really need me something to go find a hog or something." He said, "Well, Jimmy, I tell you," he said, "these boys ain't gonna sell you none of their dogs, but they'll come and go with you." And I said, "Well, I'd like that, and I said, but I'd like to know what you was talking about your bulldogs, how y'all do your bulldogs. How in the world do you get them dogs and bulldogs to mind like y'all do? He said, well, he said, I tell you what, Jim. He said, when them bulldogs are born, their brain is stuck to the top of their head. He said, until you get that knocked loose, kind of in the middle there, said they'll never be any count.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
he, they believed in spanking one pretty rough, and I've seen them get off a horse and whoop a dog with a lariat rope, a bulldog, and they'd whoop him so hard that when that horse took back off again, horse couldn't stand up for that bulldog being up on that horse. He wouldn't think get out from under him no more.
Yeah.
We was down in a place over here hunting one time, and Daddy Harvey come with him. He didn't get to where he wasn't hardly hunting him, but I mean, it was a big thing up there, up and down that Sabine River when they were hunting up there. Bubba and Mike and Daddy Harvey and Tommy Jean Coleman and all them was up there. That Daddy Harvey, he I guess was kind of, I guess you could say, the head rooster up there, because he was over that. He took everybody. He made sausage every year, and he took everybody, all them deer hunters, up down to them camps. He took them sausage every year, but Daddy Harvey, when he finally started coming down here with them boys would show up with 25 dogs and 15 horses, and that's the way we hunted. Of course, I mean, I had mules and horses anyway, but we hunted down there close to the Toriak, up down the Toriak, and on the Sabine. But most of their hunt we hunted not too far from here, and there was lots of those. They were Russian type hogs, and the first time that they came, and we caught hogs, I caught 2 sows, and we stopped over here at my dad-in-law's, and he come out there and he looked at them. He said, boys, I tell y'all what, said, if y'all worm them hogs good and get that old long hair off of them, he said, them there make some good eating hogs. Of course, he didn't know that that's the way them come in. They come in with hair.
Yes,
and anyway,
give them a treat.
they had, and yeah, we didn't have no shocking collars or nothing back then. If a dog run a deer, you had to spank him pretty good, And we was down there one day, and old Boots, he was a black and tan colored dog with about a 3/4 tail, and we got back up to where Daddy Harvey, he made him a pallet out in front of the truck with a shotgun sitting there, and he was gonna shoot him one when he come by, and he did. Not that day, but several days later. And anyway, he come back up there, and Mike, I think it was, said, Daddy Harvey said old Boots he ran a deer. He said, well, did you whoop him? He said, oh, yes. I said, I whooped him. Said, put him back in there, and said, he went on. He said, oh, he kept it going? Back on hogs? Yeah. He said, well, son, you didn't whoop him hard enough.
Whoop him hard enough, yeah.
You should have drug him on back to the truck and let me have a hope to it. But anyway, back then you just didn't have all this high-fancy, equipment you got nowadays.
No,
They got these tracking systems and stuff like that. So, I was hunting many years and finally got me one of them beep beeps. A friend I hunted on his place over here at Arcadia, Mr. Bill Reed, he told me one day, he said, we pulled up, we was hunting, or we was looking for dogs. Anyway, he said, what y'all doing? I said, trying to find my dog, Bill. He said, man, y'all spend more time looking for y'all's dogs than y'all do anything else. I said, I don't know. He said, ain't they got some way something that y'all can, track a dog with, find him? I said, yes, they do. I said, man, they high. He said, how high are you talking about? I said, well, I don't know. I said, but more money than what I got and what more than what I make. Well, anyway, he told me, he said, find out how much one of them tracking systems are. One of them beats.
Mm-hmm.
I checked it. It was $1,100 for the system and 3 collars.
Yes.
And I called him. Of course, we didn't have a cell phone back then either. I called him on the landline. He told me to come over there. I called and told him how much it was. He said, well, first chance you get, come by with it. And he wrote me a check for $1,100. It was a wildlife materials unit. And we got that tracking system. And of course, now, them beat, they were good. But, man, they were tough in them hills and hollers that we had over there.
Yeah.
And, you'd be tracking one for a mile through there and finally get over and get on a hill and you're just going the wrong way.
Yeah. I've been there.
And it just, and, for a long time, after they got these newer collars that were your screen and everything, I run mine with a beep and a screen collar.
Mm-hmm.
I was just so afraid. I said, man, ain't no way them things can work, because I look on there and it'd be a dog on there. And that was really some uptown stuff for me,
Oh, yeah.
looking at something that aggravated me. But, we found lots of hogs and lots of dogs with them big collars, and I'm sure everybody else did too, but it just, I had some, matter of fact, in recent years, I had one of my best dogs that I hunted. He was a silent dog, and he very seldom ever barked when he got there. He would try to eat a hog when he got there, and if he was by himself, he'd back up. He'd stand there looking at me. If you didn't have one of those show enough, I knew how to run a tracking system, that's the only way you could find him. And but they the tracking systems have changed, your boogies have changed. I ain't rode a horse, hunting, and whew, I don't know. It's been several years now. I take it back now. Around here close,
Yes.
that everybody's when I told somebody the other day they wanted to go hunting, and they said, "Oh man, we can go. I can go anywhere in this Toyota pickup that you can on that Kubota." I said, "Yeah, you're probably right." I said, "But you can't get in the places." "Oh yeah, I can get in them. I can get them the same way you can." I said, "No, you can't." I said, "You get in them in that pickup, and somebody's gonna come get you." Because they don't know that pickup. They know this orange, bright orange Kubota.
Yes.
And it's I ain't got near the leg under me that I used to have, so I like to try to get as close as I can now. But I have now. I ain't gonna lie, I have walked. There was a boy talking the other day, telling me we got a place we call Hollow Rock over here. And we walked 900 and something yards, and him helping me along because I wasn't gonna let him go by himself. And actually, he didn't want to go by himself. And we got in there, and Lord have mercy. We looked. I said, "That bait." I kept telling him. I said, "The bait in the creek." He said, "Are they?" I said, "Yeah, the bait in the creek." And I said, "They up on that bank over yonder." And I said, "Get over there where you can see." And I said, "Shoot that son of a gun, And got where I got to looking. It was a plot dog and a yellow dog, and both of them were his, thank the Lord. And both of them were standing on a tree, 900 and something yards. And we done walked in there too.
My goodness.
And he, the boy, bless his heart, he's been hunting with him since he was about 14. I think he's 52 now. And that part of me hasn't rubbed off on him yet. I,
I know what you mean.
they ain't got them an education, but we come up out of there and it's hills and hollers, straight up, straight down. And I'd have to crawl up some of them. And we finally got back to the truck. And right before we got to the truck, we was going up a bank and well, I felt something sting me. And he was trying to push me up the bank, and he was holding under my belt, trying to push me up. And anyway, I figured out what it was, and I told him to get the hell back. I said, get back. I said, hell, it's that gum Yellow Jackets. He said, you know what? That old man can move a whole lot faster when them Yellow Jackets after him. So I went on up that bank. It was pretty steep. I went right on up it pretty good, but I fell in some water one day, and this is no joke. It wasn't. It was right after I got to where I wouldn't leave the truck and go back, to trying to get to a bank. I love to watch a dog, and I fell in a hole of water. I bet you 3 times before I ever finally got my feet under me. It wasn't big. It wasn't 6 inches deep, but like ground,
I know it ain't funny, but I can only imagine.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Quick thanks to the supporters of the Dixie Doggers podcast.
Light Hounds.
Southern Cross Cut Gear.
Phil Wilson with UC Hunting Properties.
Rankin Ranch 38 Cattle Company.
777 Kennels Advanced Canine Nutrition.
And the old Boars N Broads.
Boy, they used to pick at me because I have fell off of some logs before and be hanging on the log and it wouldn't be waist deep, but I didn't know that, I sure enough didn't know. But I always told them, my mama they said, why didn't you learn how to swim? My mama told me, until you learn how to swim, don't get around the water. So I never learned how to swim.
You just didn't get around no water.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law, he can't swim. And we've been in some pickles before, ain't no doubt. I swim pretty decent, but he's never, like you said though, he ain't scared to get out there and wade around or something if he knows he can touch bottom or whatever. But
here in the last year and a half, probably since the biggest thing now is when I get back, they have to give a report to my wife how many times I failed, and she's got to where she'll meet them out here and say, well, how many times did you fall today? Well, the other day we went there was a hay meadow, and they'd been rooting up this boy's hay meadow, and we turned some dogs loose, and they didn't go 100 yards and bathed right outside the hay meadow, and it was 3 of us, and one boy went ahead of us, went on into the dogs. I think the other boy behind me had the gun. Well, when I wasn't planning on doing nothing that day but riding, in the pickup. It was cold, and I had a pair of slip-on shoes. And why I got out of the truck, I do not have a clue. But anyway, I started down in there to where the dogs were bathed, and my foot, and this buddy of mine that is hunting with me so long, he has got a real weak stomach. He cannot stand nothing. I mean, he can't, if he accidentally hits a gut on a hog or a deer or anything, so it's over him, he's going to be skinny.
Ew.
But, or getting it. But anyway, I started in there to it, and I tripped and I fell. And when I fell, my shoe came off over my heel. When it did, my shoe turned sideways, like flat with the ground, and my knee was pointing to the side of the shoe. When he got there to me, he said, oh my God, you broke your leg. Boy, he started screaming, gagging, and I said, get your ass on down in there. I said, you have to get down in there. Hey, man, you broke your leg, man. I said, no, I ain't broke my leg. I said, get on down in there. But anyway, they won't let me wear my shoes no more.
Damn.
You know, I have to wear boots. So, but I know you asked me about how, but Daddy Harvard Big in the Coleman Boys is where I started, and then I guess Ryle Taylor and Brett Taylor and them boys, they were just boys in school, and we I I thought it had to me, I'm sure I've seen some of these guys, it's got some real catch dog, but I hadn't seen a real good catch dog in a long time. You know, uh, it's around here. It's hard to have a good catch dog. I mean, you gotta catch lots of hogs, and he's got to be pretty game. And now they're running vest on him so much. I had a. Speaking of vest, we went down. We used to go all over the country and hunt. I've been to Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, South Texas, West Texas,
Yes, sir.
uh, everywhere hunting, and uh, Oklahoma. But I bought many years ago, back in the 80s. I bought a bulldog. He was black and white spotted. They called him Spot. I bought him out from man over in Louisiana, Mr. Kenny Reeves. He's an ag teacher over there, and I was good friends with him. And give him $50. No. That's what I told my wife. I give $50 for him, but I give 100. And anyway, I got a vest. One of them back then they had. Y'all ever remember seeing them old felted
Oh yeah.
looking vests?
I've got one. I've got a green one, and it just had the straps all the way across it. You just tucked it over and kept pulling till it fit.
Yeah, and then they had wings on mine, to go back to their flank.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to pick at me because of them flaps. They say they look like an airplane, but back then, old Spot never got cut, and these other ones, I've got pictures of bulldogs up on the back of their side by side. I mean, on the back, it wasn't side by side back in, on the four-wheeler or on their pickup, and they'd be picking at me about my dog with the wings, and old Spot, he wouldn't have a cut on him. Others we'd be sewing on dogs,
Oh yeah.
But old Spot, and this is Mr. Kenny Reeves, is being an ag teacher, I guess, and being Mr. Kenny, he was a serious person. He wasn't nothing funny to him. Me and two friends of mine, Mr. Gary Payne and another guy down here in the lower country, went to South Texas hunting. And some guys had called and they wanted us to come down and hunt with them. They were older than us, but anyway, we caught some hogs and we got down there, and I don't remember what I was doing, but I wasn't there at the truck when he was loading the dogs. And when I got over, they said, "Hey, Jimbo," said, "these guys said we can't catch these hogs down here in South Texas with old Spot." I said, "Really?" "Yeah." They said that they'd kill old Spot and eat that vest. I said, "Really?" So I said, "They must have some bad ones." But anyway, we went out there. I got back home. Mr. Kenny called, and he said, "Well," he said, "Jim, no." He said, how did y'all's hunt go?" I said, "Well, it went all right, Mr. Kenny." I said, "But you know what?" I said, "Them guys told us that we couldn't catch them hogs down there with old Spot." "Really?" I said, "Yeah." So he said, "They told us that them hogs down there would kill old Spot and eat that vest." He said, "Well, you know what? No, I tell you what. Now, they might kill old Spot, but I just don't think they can eat that vest." I mean, he was serious about
He was
everything.
serious. Yeah.
And that was one of the biggest things down there. They thought, and that vest, I wished I'd have kept that vest. I don't even remember what I've done with it. And I may still have it in some of that junk down there, but uh, it's 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 a lot of stuff that back then. I mean, I did. I mean, on spot was. I mean, we rode mules back when I had on spot, and on spot would. Once you caught the hog, you could slap him back. He'd get out of the way. You drag a hog out. He'd follow along beside you, till you got to the truck, And, he was just a real mannered dog. And I didn't do it. I mean, he was that way when I got him.
Yes,
and then I've had some more that, a one more for sure, that I had some boys come from the other side of Houston down there in the rice paddies down there, and wanted to breed a dog I call Scooby, but he got his education with electricity, and he was pretty sharp. One time, that was it. You could speak his name. He would not do nothing until you put him on him, And I mean, he was just. But like I said, though, I'm sure these guys got lots of. I'm just not. I ain't never been a person. I've never been able to just let a bulldog, especially a catch dog. I'll put it that way. Well, I've had some catch dogs that weren't bulldog bred that was good as any bulldog ever. Well, I had a shaggy dog. We called him Shag Nasty, and he come out of Waco, and I was working in, and I know I'm just hearing you under, but
no, this is exactly what we want. This is what everybody wants to hear.
I get to thinking about stuff, and I'm getting. I don't know how old I am. I think I'm either 72 or 3. I don't know, but stuff, it'll come back to me every now and then. But this dog, and anybody around here remember? Everybody around here that's a hog hunter remembers Shag Nasty. My sister-in-law, my brother-in-law he moved houses, and they lived in Bahia, Texas. And my sister-in-law was a dog person. She loved dogs. She called me one day, and she said, no, Alan Everett. No, not Alan Everett. I can't remember the man's name now. The guy that wanted to breed those Scoobies, he called me. He was down there on a school job or something. He was a school teacher. He told me, he said, call me, and he said, man, I found you a half bulldog and half cur dog down here. I said, well, Jim. What was Jim's name? Anyway, he called me, and I said, man, I can't come down there and get no dog. He said, well, I'm in a rent car, and I can't load him in this rent car. And he said, you want him? I said, yeah, I want him. I said, let me make some phone calls. So I called my sister-in-law, and she said, asked me where they were, where he was, and I told her where he was. And Butch said, my brother-in-law said, I'll go get him and bring him here. So I said, Jeremy, at boy mine, I said, will you go to Maya and pick up a catch dog for me? I mean, a dog. And he said, yeah. So anyway, he left. He got back at next morning about 2:00. And this dog had no less than 20 foot of long chain on him. And he was a shaggy brown dog with a long muzzle. I mean, he looked like a German Shepherd, healer, I don't know, had a flag in his tail. And I was sick. So I done spent all that gas money. And, told Jimmy I'd give him $50 if he'd go there and get him for me. He drives up, and I had a hog crate, a big steel hog crate with plywood on the inside walls to keep the hogs from breaking their teeth off. Because I had a little market over in Louisiana from a man that would buy the big hogs with good teeth for a hog baying he'd have over there. So I didn't want to break their teeth off. So anyway, when Jimmy drove up, he was mad. He said, man, he had skinned all the paint off your truck with his chain. And he said, he had drug it up down the truck, tried to catch every car, every truck that went by. And I said, well, just stick him in that hog crate. And I said, we'll euthanize him in the morning, for better words.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay. So next morning we got up, and he said, I got him up. He said, what are you going to do with him? I said, we're going to take him to the boneyard, send him to Georgia. And that's what we used to call it, send him to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And we got him and started with him. And I said, hold on just a minute. I said, we had a hog out here, a black hog. We called him Leroy Brown. And he was bad. He weighed about 160, 150 pounds, but that was the baddest little hog. That hog wound up going to Mississippi. They used him in bayings. They bayed him as high as 22 single dogs.
Wow.
22 single dogs.
He was probably over in Corinth, Mississippi, wasn't it? Reggie Little.
Reggie Little, yeah.
Yeah.
I
know exactly who you're talking about.
And there was some another group of folks. I can't remember. It was a boy and a girl, him and his wife, in Mississippi. I can't even remember the town they lived in. But anyway, we went. We got the dog, and I told Jeremy, I said, hold on just a minute. I said, we'll see. If nothing else, I said, we'll let this hog kill him, nothing else. So we took him out there to the round pen. We opened the gates. And we turned Leroy Brown in. I had a snubbing post. It was a bay pen, horse breaking pen too, Yes, and we took old Shag Nasty in there, and I turned him loose, and he seen old Leroy Brown. He run over to him and just kind of eased up to him and smelt of it. When he did, Leroy overhauled that little dog, and when he quit, Shag Nasty hit him caught for the ear.
Yeah.
And I know what Leroy was cutting him too. Anyway, we get him off, get the hog, back him up, turned him loose again. He hit him, sounded like a freight train when he hit him. Never missed. And he never missed. I seen him get cut off a hog one time. But as far as missing a hog, he never missed a hog in a bad thicket, a running hog. His favorite was a running hog. It's one broke going across a long road or something. You could turn old Shag Nasty loose, and you better build to him because he's fixing to catch him pretty quick, And but we caught lots of hogs with him. He learned how to ride on the hog crate, running as fast as we had a matter of fact. We pulled a hog crate on a hog trailer. For that crate for years and years with a 250 Yamaha Timberwolf, 2-wheel drive. And we caught lots of hogs and loaded that crate up many a time with some good boys, and it was just, we had hogs were, well, as a buddy of mine told me a long time ago, he said, we was doing pretty good till they got all this old Russian mess in there.
Messed it up.
Messed it all up. We started off in Panola County up there on that lease with 10 sows and a black boar. And when we finally got to go hunting up there, Mr. Duck Payne was at the feed store on Saturday morning. They was eating peanuts. It was cold weather. We got to talk about hogs hunting, and he said, Well, I got lots of hogs over on my place. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, y'all need to come up there and go. I said, I'm going to tell you something. Don't ask me to, don't want me to come if you don't want me to come. Because I
Mm-hmm.
do that. And so that next Saturday, his son, he was still in school and he was 18. I think he's probably 56, 7 now. But you could pull in there and we'd pull up on them big pipelines going to the Sabine River and you would just drive by those pipelines and count the groups of hogs. It was,
Oh,
it
damn.
ain't no simple. 10 years. It was 10 years of hogs over from 10 south.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, that was
It was
stacked in there then, wasn't it?
I mean, it was, you, they had 450
Let me
black
see.
cows in different places on that 8,000, and then that 10,000 they could graze on, but most of it was woods, but all of them were woods cattle. But yeah, they was we caught the first Russian hog, type hog, that wasn't a kind of a just no black reader type hog
Mm-hmm.
on an oil well location up there, backed up against one of them tanks they had up there. And, I mean, it done
Yes, sir.
got so bad that you could, we catch 35, 40 in a day,
Oh,
and
damn.
that's how you want it. And then we'd load every one of them in a trailer. And when we got through, we'd pick out the big boars. He knew. He knew. They had a little more money than what I had. And uh, and he knew what I was coming for. And
Mm-hmm.
we keep all the big boars. We turn all the sows. And we got to where the younger boars, we got to where we'd cut them and turn them back loose. We'd cut all the boars and we keep the bars. And we had some bars up there that we had marked and stuff that we knew they were 15 years old,
Yes, sir.
and
I
old
don't think
hogs.
a lot of people realize how old a hog can really live, Mr. Jimmy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
What do you think the oldest one that you could recollect? What do you think the oldest one you've seen?
he was probably gonna be up there at that place to really know because we marked him a
Yes, sir.
20-year-old,
20-year-old.
20 years old.
I believe you 100%. There's some young men down here. They started thermal hunting, and we haven't been able to bar a hog in many years. Probably 10+ years now.
Yeah.
Or longer. Probably around 2010, I guess. I don't know. However long that is.
About 13 years.
Okay, 13. Okay,
It was like 2012, 2013 when they passed it.
and these boys, they shot a couple of them last year, and they had my mark on them, and
Really?
that was the last one I'd done. So they 13. They was already pretty good size then. So I figured a couple of years old when we done it, and so they're between 12 and 15 years old now.
Mm. Well, it's just, up there they were protected, I guess you could kind of say,
Yes, sir.
Because there was corn out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They fed cattle in the winter, and them old cows. I mean, it wasn't nothing to drive up on a set of troughs that there'd be more hogs in than would be cows.
Wow.
Man. And they mixed all their grain, for the cow, cottonseed, hulls, and meal, and corn, and
Cottonseed to put it on.
yeah, but it is, we never, and you always look back and you wonder, man, I wish I'd have kept up with how many hogs we cut,
Yes, sir.
and turned loose and marked, and it was just so many. I had a hog here that I raised that he come off a Lake Pontchartrain. I had two of them, and I raised them, and they got to be 4 and 5-year-olds, and they had wool on like sheep up on their neck and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we took one of those hogs. We didn't tell nobody. We snuck up there, and we turned one loose.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Duck Payne, the old man owned it, Gary. His son's name was Gary. Well, he told us 2 or 3 times. He said, "Man, there's an old big hog. I'm talking about this hog weighed 300." And that's not exaggerating. That's the real
Yes, sir.
weight. Lots of people kind of get their weights mixed up now.
Oh yeah,
And they did back then too, but they really do. They kind of I'll underguess one before I'll overguess him.
Yes,
You
sir.
know,
Yes, sir.
we caught a bar hog, and this is right here at the house. He didn't have nary a year, but he was about 3 miles from here. It was a bar, and I can't remember exactly, but he weighed 453 pounds, I think.
God almighty.
I know he weighed over 4, and it was 450 something. But they weighed him on a set of scales hanging up on a John Deere tractor.
Yes, sir.
And he was just a big bar hog. And, it's really hard now. I mean, now in some of these places where they got lots of grain and stuff, in Alabama down there, they used to have some big hogs down around Dothan, Alabama.
Oh yeah,
Down
that's a few hours, a couple hours from us. We live in North Alabama.
Okay. And they, them peanut farmers
Yes, Lord.
down there, them peanuts put it on them. And, I can remember a friend of mine, his name was Henderson Johnson. He called me, and he had a hog hanging up, and there was a step ladder there beside him, and he had a set of scales there, and he told me that hog weighed 750 pounds.
Oh,
and I
dang.
said, Henderson, he said something was said about the hog, or man, I want a picture of that hog or something. I told him, I don't care about the hog. I want to see the scale.
Yeah.
I want y'all to bring me the scale. Let me look at them. But the hog, the thing about it is the hog was a blonde color.
Mm-hmm.
So he had some domestic hog in him. He was a Yorkshire bred,
Yeah, he's
type
blooded
hog.
hog.
Yeah, he is a good blooded type hog, but his old ears drooped down over his. Probably had some land race in him as long as he was.
Yes, sir.
I think he was like 8 foot from the tip of his nose to his feet hanging on the ground.
Yes,
so,
sir.
but them boys down there, Henderson, he passed away. I guess it's been about 5 years ago now, 4 years ago, and he was from Dothan. He come down here and hunted with me one time years ago, and most of the time we'd meet over in Louisiana, around Kelly, Louisiana,
Yes,
and Mr. Orwell Roberts. I hunted with. I met Mr. Orwell. I don't know if y'all remember. Do y'all ever remember an association called the Wild Boar Conservation Association?
I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I've heard of it, and like I said, I've been running hog dogs about 20, a little over 20, around 20 years or so now, and
Yeah.
But I've heard tell of it through several different people over the years. Like I said, for the first, I don't know, 6 or 8 years, I didn't know anything other than what was happening right here at the house,
Right.
Because, back then we really didn't, most guys that was hog hunting, we didn't put it out there to,
Right.
like we do now. Now it's,
Right.
now you got podcasts and you're on social media and TV and internet and all this stuff. Used to, we kind of kept our shit quiet,
Oh, I understand.
And yeah, I mean, I know y'all did too, because we were doing stuff that, it was a way of life for us. And some people just didn't understand it, which that's still like that today. But now go ahead with that about that association. I'd like to hear some more about that.
Well, we had Mr. Dennis Good lived down around Chalmette, down in there in New Orleans. He owned Blue Street Drilling Company. Pat Myers, he lived it down around Chalmette down there too. And anyway, I don't know if Mr. Dennis got it started, and he had a boy named Denny Good, and they would, they had an airboat and a helicopter.
Wow.
And I got to go with them one time. They wanted me to go, and I culled the airboat. I got in the helicopter. I didn't like them water moccasins and alligators and stuff all down there, running. I didn't care about that. But, they would have meetings, I guess the first one they had was in, maybe the first one was in Jackson, Mississippi.
Okay.
And the next one they had the next year was in New Orleans down there, and they had it in the parking lot of the Ramada Inn. And they said, they just had a meeting. They never had a band. And they were some boys come out of North Carolina, Star, might have been South, one of the Carolinas, Star, South Carolina, North Carolina. They come in here and they had a bunch of hogs. I say a bunch. They had 4 or 5 on a trailer. And they got to talking, and Mr. Orwell called me. He is over at Kelly, and he was going, and he told me, you need to try to come. Anyway, so me and Jeremy, he was about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old maybe. Anyway, we loaded our stuff up. We never had been away from Huber, Texas, and we didn't even know how to get to New Orleans, but we were going to try to make it, and of course this was after I-49. I think, I can't even remember if we did 40. No, we didn't. We took every little old nook and cranny down through there and went down through there and got there. It took us several hours to do it. But they got to talking, we'll have a band. Well, they got somebody to donate them some pallets down there in New Orleans, down there where we was at. I don't even remember exactly where we was at. But anyway, and they sent us some pallets, and that was the first band that the Wild Boar Conservation Association bunch ever had a band. And then, they had one in Lake Eufaula, Alabama. Had one there, and we'd go to Lake Eufaula to the band and the meeting, and then we would leave there and go on to Florida, down to Logie, Florida, in that Apsicola National Forest down there, and bear hunt. And we'd go down there, and I couldn't help it. I like running anything with a dog, But I'd take a couple of dogs, and I had some dogs that run a bear, Now,
what breed of dogs were you running at the time, Mr.
I had a blue tick dog, and I had the friend that was with me kept calling her an English dog. And matter of fact, what happened was their dogs were running. These other folks, they was, I don't know, 15, 20 dogs in the pack, and they would holler on them radios, and you'd pull up so far, and then somebody else would pull up, then somebody else would pull up. Well, anyway, they'd been running this bear for, I don't know, a good while. And anyway, they sounded like the dogs were coming straight to us. Well, our dogs were still in the coop. And anyway, a guy on the radio hollered and told us to pull up. When we pulled up, well, we heard him shoot. Well, the bear come out in the ditch, and he missed him. But anyway, my buddy of mine told me, he said, hurry up, back up. We got back around there, and we backed up there, and we turned that red tick Jeep, and we turned that blue dog loose. When they called the blue dog, I had a red tick Jeep and that blue dog, and they called him an English dog. That's what it was.
Okay.
But anyway, of course, what happened was when they got there, that scent was hot, and them dogs like probably, I don't know, 200 yards getting to the road where the bear turned around at.
Mm.
So when we poured our dogs out, our two dogs, they were hot on a bear. So when they got back in there, of course, both of them were pretty fast. Well, our two dogs treed the bear first. Well, some people come off another road in there and killed the bear. Well, as we were coming out, everybody was talking about their dog and this, that, and the other. And we was helping drag the bear out and stuff. I was dragging the bear because the bear was in about, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches of water, and he was floating pretty good, so it was easy dragging. And that year, they had brought biologists in to, we're going to get off on bear hunting now.
Oh, I'm fine with that.
To check the size of the bears and measure the head, and they had to weigh 100, I don't remember how much, 200 pounds maybe. That was a big bear, but down there.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we got out and everybody was taking pictures of their dogs and stuff. And the guy that shot the bear said, man, he said, y'all can get them dogs out of the way. He said, all I want a picture of that English dog. He kept talking about the English dog all the way out. And that boy that was with me come up beside me. He said, man, they talking about old Blue. I said, well, hell, he's a boom tick. He said, he's an English dog. I said, okay, whatever he is. Anyway, they want to take a picture with him and the red tick Jip that trade the bear. Well, we hunted down there after that. That was our first trip. And then Mr. Oil, I guess where we'd pick Mr. Oil up and we'd go back. Then I think we went 3 years, and then that's when they shut the bear deal down, you know. But they had a place down there they call Tate's Hale, and that's in the Apalachicola National Forest. The roads were 10-mile blocks, and in Tate's Hale they were 1-mile blocks. What they would do is if you got in Tate's Hale, you couldn't run bear, wasn't supposed to run. You had to catch your dog. You had to catch the dog. So if you was running the bear and they started crossing or something, you'd catch the dog. Well, that's what they told me. We got to catch the dogs. Well, we didn't even have a dog in the hunt this time. And they had 32 dogs running this bear. And when he crossed, I started catching dogs, putting them in the coop. Well, I'd put them in, they'd turn them out. They'd put them in, they'd turn them out. And I said, what the hell y'all going to do? They said, well, y'all got on the radio, y'all catch your dogs, catch you, because that was for somebody else's benefit, not ours.
Yeah.
But anyway, Harrison Johnson pulled up there, and he had an Airedale dog, and his name was Hacksaw. And he got up there and he told me, he said, come on, go with me. So we jumped in he had one of them little old, I don't know, a Zuzu, whatever you call them, 4-wheel drive thing. We pulled out. But anyway, he had a dog, a plot dog. His name was he was Alabama Hammer was his name.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, it had one called Dallas, and I forget what all, but anyway, it had Sunshine. They were some pretty stout plot dogs, and matter of fact, most of them dogs down there were plot dogs. There was some blue tick, but trend walkers and stuff. But anyway, me and Harrison started dodging down them 1-mile blocks, trying to cut that bear off, and we finally got over there, and the bear crossed right in front of us. He opened the door. Hacksaw fell out. He went out there about 100 yards. Hacksaw sat down on him. He made that bear climb a tree. And, them 1-mile blocks made a whole lot of difference than 10-mile blocks.
Oh, yeah.
But it was, we hog hunted some down there. We'd go at night.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't care nobody go at night, but some of them boys wanted to hunt at night. I'd take my dogs. I said, y'all catch them. I'll go with y'all. You ain't going with them. And we caught, there was some hogs down there. And of course, up down there in that Alpha National Forest in the Fort Worth in, it was about like East Texas, it's pine trees and
Yes, sir.
stuff, but
those bear down there, we went this past year to South Georgia. And it's literally, you got to be careful because you'll be over in Florida. You know what I mean? It's that close. And we went with some guys and they were running bear dogs, and they had some pretty big bear for what I've seen, 300 to 500 pounds. Oh yeah. Like, I think we were there the last couple of days of the season. And the first day we were there, one of the boys killed a 334. And then the weekend before that was a 516, I want to say. And there were several in between that size. I was really surprised at how big them bear was, myself.
Because, I'm going to say 150, 180 pounds was a big bear down there.
Yeah.
That them boys killed. Because I remember one, Mr. Gerald Gregg owned the Ford place up here at Carthage. He'd bring me a couple of dogs every now and then. I'd hunt them for him and stuff. And he would, one of those trips, he wanted to go. And it's a pretty good story here. He, bless his heart, he was Mr. Orwell. Mr. Orwell used to always tell me that don't never let the truth stand in the way of a good story.
Yeah.
But this is a true story. But there was we went down there and when we pulled up, and it was cool weather, but it wasn't cold weather.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't no ice on the ground or snowing, or it wasn't 35 degrees by no means. But we pulled up, it looked like 3 men or 3 bodies hanging up in trees.
Ooh.
And it was bear. They'd skin them, cut their head off, and had them hanging up in trees. And so we spent a day or two there with them. We hunted with them. Gerald, he enjoyed it, and he was he's real finicky about what he ate, what he drank, all that kind of stuff. And we was hunting one day, and one of the days, the last day we was there, we planned on staying longer, and Gerald never would let me drive. He'd always drive. Well, we got up there, and them old boys, they were pretty rough cats, and they pulled out that brown jug and started pulling on it. Old Gerald said, "Mr. Gregg," he said, "won't you hit all of this in?" He said, "No, sir, I don't believe I do." And boy, they done got talking loud and carrying on. And anyway, they pulled out another jug, and then we started going back to camp. They got up there at the camp. Anyway, we got up there, and we stayed in a trailer there that Henderson Johnson had, and he was there with us. Anyway, Gerald, we went on over, me and Henderson went on over to the camp, and some of the women folk were there, and they was cooking, and the men were cooking, and they'd cooked some bear, and I couldn't eat no bear. But anyway, they went over there, and a few minutes, Gerald, well, he's getting nervous, and he come in there, he said, they had them brown jugs out drinking on that moonshine, and he said, "Jimbo, man, I hate to tell you, man, we're going to have to go." Said, "Nancy," that's his wife's name. Said, "Nancy's sick." I said, "Oh, Gerald, really?" Yeah. Said, "Nancy's sick," which in the back of my mind, I knew what the deal was. Anyway, I said, "Well, we gotta go. Mr. Owen said, "Man, I hate you. We gotta go." I said, "Well, we better go." I said, "Miss Nancy's sick. We better go." So, and we loaded her stuff, and I said, "Tell you what, Gerald, I'm gonna drive." He said, "Okay, you can drive." And anyway, we went coming through Mobile. He said, "Let's pull over here. We'll get us a room, and we'll just spend the night, get up in the morning." I said, "No, Gerald, we got to go." we got to go home. Miss Nancy's sick. We got to go home. Well, he sat over in the passenger side, and he'd doze off asleep and bump his head on the on the dash. And finally, when we got here, right here to my house, he had to call one of his hands to bring a vehicle and somebody else to get his pickup to take him home.
Oh,
And he said, "Well, I didn't know we was gonna do one of them 10K runs." I said, "Well," I said, do you want my wife to call and check on Miss Nancy and make sure she's all right?" And he just kind of looked, give me one of them go to hell looks.
oh
like,
yeah.
He said, "Payback is tough, bro." I thought, yeah, it sure is. We going next year.
Oh my goodness.
But we never went back. That was our last trip on the bear hunt. But that bear hunt, it was a lot of fun. I'd have rather seen one made up on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that year that was the year we got home, and Henderson called me 3 days later and said, "Oh, Alabama Hammer had got killed. They bayed on a knoll in there." He said on a huckleberry hill. I don't know where huckleberries grow,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, and said the old bear wouldn't climb a tree. He said that bear was an old mean sow bear. He said she just reached out and grabbed the old hammer. And of course, I always picked at them, because that first time that them dogs crossed that levee down there going into Tate's Hill, I had a movie camera, and I was going to film them, as the bear went across and when the dog went across. Well,
Yes,
when the bear got to the water, there was water on both sides. It was on one side, on the bear side. Anyway, when he got to the water, he just kind of walked up there to it, got him a drink of water, and just kind of went off in it, swam across, come up. He wasn't 100 yards, he wasn't 75 yards from it. Come up out the other side, and he shook the water off of him, and he walked across that levee.
Mm.
And when they called and told me that Alabama Hammer had got killed, I said, "My Lord," I said, "what in the world happened? He get hung up in something?" I said, "Because there ain't no way a bear could have killed him, because they never would catch up to one, as slow as they was, But anyway, they didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, say shit.
But Alabama, and I guess all them other hands over there, just like Mr. Oil, he had plot dog, and I guess all them dogs have been divvied out. I had some of them, but all my stuff got so old and died, and I've got one plot dog now. It goes back to some of Mike Colley's dogs down in New Orleans.
Okay, some of the Bayou Cajun stuff, yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, if you had any plot dog. I mean, you were talking about some of the biggest names in the plot stuff, and that's why I was like, I figured you probably had a few plot here and there.
Well, I had at one time I had 3, and every one of them, and old Duffy was given to me as a pup, and Mr. Oil had I had several plot dogs over the years, but I had this one dog, a plot dog, that Mr. Oil called me one day, and he said, "What you gonna be doing in the morning?" I said, I'm gonna be sleeping." It was on Sunday morning. He said, "Look, I gotta go repossess a dog." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yep." He said, "Will you ride with me?" I said, "Where's he at?" He said, "Out Brackenville, out there in West Texas, way out there."
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he come by and picked me up. We took off in a little old Isuzu pickup. Wouldn't run about 60 miles an hour. Anyway, we go all the way out there at the Breckenridge or something like that. I can't even remember the name of it. Right there at Abilene. Anyway, and the man met us in town, and I don't know why to this day, he met us in town, and we had to follow him to his place. The man's name was Will Lilly, and we followed him to his place to get the dog. And Mr. Oil was kind of dubious of him anyway. And he had really talked bad about Mr. Orwell's dogs and about Mr. Orwell lying to him about the dog, and he wasn't this and wasn't doing this. Anyway, Mr. Orwell was done on them years then.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, we put up the man's house, and when I got on Will looked like one of these show enough show dogs. His old tail had that spring loaded tail up over his back, cat footed, stood up, real pretty and straight, had about a half an ear, didn't have a full hound ear, and a pretty dog. And anyway, I loaded him up in the truck, and Mr. Oil told me, he said, I need to go out here and look at the rest of his dogs. Mr. Oil thought he was stealing dogs. So anyway, he goes out there, and the man didn't think, Mr. Oil didn't like old Will, but Mr. Oil wasn't going to let somebody get to him, you know. And anyway, I don't even know what he gives for the dog, but Mr. Oil went out there and looked at the dog. When he come back, sat down in the truck, I told him, I'll drive. He walked up that truck and he told Will Lilly, some real bad stuff. He told him, don't ever let me hear you talking about my dogs or me. I will personally come out here and whoop your ass.
Hell
and,
yeah.
Mr. Oil said, Will just kind of stood there looking. Well, we took off. He had a long driveway. And when we got down to the end of the driveway where we hit I wasn't paying no attention. Mr. Oil was driving when we left. Anyway, I said, which way will we go here? Mr. Oil said, well, I don't know. It probably wouldn't do no good to go back and ask him, would it? I said, no, I don't guess. He said, but you see that big hill way over yonder? He said, the highway is right there. So we started hunting. But anyway, we brought old Will home, and he took him on home with him, and I guess he still didn't like him. We was going down below Houston to go hunting with some boys at a rice paddy down there.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Craner and his brother was down there, and both of them were school teachers. And we were going down there to hunt with them. And when Mr. Oil come by here, his pickup was double loaded with dogs and dog crates and bed rolls and everything else. We unloaded off of his and put it on Buddy my pickup. And he kept telling me when he called me and told me he's coming, he said, I'm bringing you something. And I thought, oh Lord, what's he bringing me? When he brought old Will, and he said, old Will belongs to you. I didn't even want to go hog hunting. I didn't even want to go below Houston go hunting. I wanted to go hunt old Will. Well, anyway, Will was a different breed of dog. And anyway, I put him in the pen, left him here, went on down there, and we hog hunted. We come on back, and we got back, and I told Mr. Oil, matter of fact, when we got back, my daughter come out, and she said, Daddy, there's a man down below Shelbyville called and said the hogs rooted the pasture up. This was probably 2:30 in the evening. We got back, and I said, y'all want to go down and go hog hunting? Mr. Oil said, yeah, we might as well. We didn't do much good down yonder. I said, I hear you. So we went down there and caught a hog and come on back here, and I don't know, several weeks later, 2 or 3 weeks later, a man had called down on the lake down there on Toledo Bend and said, hey, I got a hog down rooting up my dam on my pond. Could y'all come down here and see if y'all can catch him? I said, yeah. We go down there and look at the rooting and all this stuff. And anyway, I had 3 tracking collars is all I had. Well, I had 3 dogs that I thought a lot more of than I did old Will. I didn't know nothing about Will. I knew he'd bark at a hog in a pen, and I knew he didn't bark on the chain, and I liked that. But anyway, we go down there and we turned a black and tan dog that my buddy had, a plot dog, old Duffy, and my blue English dog, if they called him, a loose. And they jumped the hog, and I turned old Will too, and didn't no more think about it, nothing. And I turned two more dogs to him, and one of the dirt roads that we went down where they had crossed at, one of the dogs was laying in the ditch dead. The hog stopped, and they killed him. But it wasn't the blue tick. I mean, it wasn't the English dog. It wasn't Old Duffy, and it wasn't the black and tan. And anyway, we go on, wasn't thinking about nothing but getting to them dogs, they was going on with it and running it pretty good, and figured it'd bay any minute. And anyway, we got crossed another highway in there. And anyway, and we got over there. And after we crossed, there's a place they call Ragtown down there. And it's right on the lake. There's a lot of nice homes down there. And anyway, we got down there and we got up on a high hill in there, and we could hear them. We could hear them coming, the blue tick and Old Duffy and the black and tan. And to our left, we could hear a chop mouth dog just honk, going on the way. He was 3/4 of a mile ahead of them other three. And I thought, Eric, that buddy of mine, he said, what in the world's that? I said, I don't know. I said, I can tell you what it is. Lord, let's get around there. He said, what is it? I said, it's Old Will. And I said, I think he's running a deer or he's running baying somebody's cows. He's doing something, but he ain't going to be running what he's supposed to be. Well, about that time, he said, hold up just a minute. We started to back up. He said, listen. He said, whatever he's running, they run it. Because they made that right turn and going the same way he's going. But he will run way ahead of them. We go all the way around to the lake, come up over a hill, and we heard them bayed in there behind a big 2-story log house. And we took off, go around there, couldn't get up with nobody there, and there was people sitting out in the yard at another house. They said, them people ain't here. Y'all go ahead and do what you got to do, so we'll let them know what's going on. Anyway, we caught the hog, and I'd been feeding my dogs. Like back then, I was telling you, I very seldom got to buy a sack of dog feed.
Yes, sir.
But I was feeding them meat scraps from a barbecue place. And when we got back around and showed the man the hog, the old man said, well, boy, I'm glad y'all caught him. And he knew the story on Old Will and everything. And he said, I noticed Old Will didn't have him a place in the box. It's going to leave him tied out there in the hot sun. I said, yeah, because he likes it. He ain't never quit barking. Them other three, when we caught the hog, they laid down over there in the water and quit. They was through. Old Will ain't never quit barking, helped catch the hog. Anyway, and I said, no, he going to stay out there in that heat, and he's feeding. And he said, well, what about you going to start feeding him some make good dog food? I said, nope. I said, all of them's going to start eating meat scraps, because if he can do it on meat scraps, they can do it on meat scraps too.
That's right.
But Old Will was a different dog. I finally got him. Good ones get killed,
Oh, yeah.
Real good ones. I always liked that dog. I mean, he was I always liked the chop mouth dog,
Yes, sir.
I mean, if they was going to run something, it just seemed to me that they could run. A chop mouth dog could run faster.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, a chop mouth dog was going to run with her head up.
With her head, yeah, exactly.
And I liked the dog that could run with his head up.
I've got one that runs like that. It's one of the few hounds I've ever owned. And after I run him a couple of times, I noticed he chopped real good, on track. So I said, so I'm going to keep that rascal. And then sure enough, we ain't really got nothing else that can hardly stay with him.
Right.
He's going to be out in the front.
Yeah, I got a plot G up here now that's at 10 months old, she'd run all day long. People get aggravated. I get aggravated because, about noon, I'm about ready to come to the house. Especially when it starts warming up. She's bad to get her old pads on her feet. Every time you take her, she's going to run pads off her feet. And the last time, I guess this last Saturday, we took her and she run from 7 o'clock to 1:30, I guess. And we finally caught her crossing the road. Well, we shot the hog And when he crossed the road, we was ready to shorten it up a little bit. That's the only time we took her, and she wasn't crippled. And she wasn't crippled the next day. So, but I'd been putting copper talks. I keep a bottle of copper talks sitting there, and I keep her old feet. I keep them doctored up with that copper talk,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But yeah, it's I just like a chop mouth dog. Even the cur dog, if he barks, oh, he'll chop. I mean, a lot of people don't like a open mouth dog.
Yes,
You know, and just like I said a while ago, though, I've caught more hogs with cur dogs than I have hounds, but I can put on a show enough cold track,
Yep.
with a hound. And
I used to hate any dog that barked at all. I couldn't stand it. And then, over the years, same thing like you were talking about earlier with the hogs and the way they changed. Because we always caught the hogs pretty quick. I mean, we ran rougher dogs, and hell, most of the time it wasn't much baying going on. And then it got to where they started running, and now we went this past weekend. We was down there at Uncle Earl's, and we went with a couple of young men. And he said, this one property, he said, look, these hogs don't really run that bad. And I said, well, it's been a long, many years, since I've seen some that didn't. And my God, I'm telling you now, them hogs, they didn't really run. And we bayed right on the side of the road, pulled right up there to them, got in there and caught a couple. One of them broke loose, and hell, they had it bayed right there at the truck. I mean, literally standing in the road. I said, boys, this is like old times here.
Yeah.
It was, and I realized it was a lot easier to bay a hog in certain areas then, certain type hogs. And now they just run so daggum long and hard. They do here anyway.
They start practicing when they're babies.
Mm-hmm.
They and so I got a there was a man made a comment the other day. He's a school teacher. He's retired now. Mr. Ronnie Wolf. He told a fella up here in town, Boyd hunts with me all the time. Eric Perry, he told him they was talking about hogs. He said, well, have you seen any hogs out there on your place, Mr. Ronnie? He said, no, I ain't been seeing many. He said, but let me tell you something. As long as Jimbo Fausett is living and got dogs, and there's going to be hogs around here to run. So I told him the other day, I said, I got a pot-bellied sow down there. She's half pot-bellied and half wild. I'm bringing her to a good wild boar, and I'm trying to get all them short-legged hogs out there. Maybe I can catch one every now and then.
There you go. That's the proper management.
That's right. You got to do something too. I don't think man's going to find no better dogs. He just going, that buddy man used to tell me up there in Panola County, he said, we either going to get more dogs or more hogs, one of the other.
Yes.
I don't know. So it makes it kind of iffy. You don't know, and I want to tell you something. This is the honest truth.
Yes, sir.
So many, many, many years ago, I was hunting cur dogs and didn't have no hound. Well, I had a old ducky. I had him till he was 15, and after they brought him back, but I'd been invited going to them wild boar conservation association meetings. I'd been invited to go hunting with people, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, everywhere. And I told my wife, I said, you know what? I'm going to start going. When somebody offers me to go hunt with them, I'm going to go. But I ain't taking a dog. She said, oh, you going to take dogs? I said, no, I ain't taking no dog. I said, I'm going to go with them. And when I get back, I may not have a dog left.
Yep.
I said, but you know what? After I made my little tour, I come back and I had just as good a dog as anybody else. Back then, down here, we hunted hogs and other people went hog hunting.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Had to go. We had to turn leaves over to find one. And
that was one of the questions I was going to ask you when you went and done your tour. And I've done the same thing in the past 2 years. And just like you said, I thought, well, I'm probably not going to have no dogs when I get home.
Yeah.
And I was actually pretty happy about it. I said, For what I've got, I think I'm happy with what I got. Anyway, I went to a couple of places, Mr. Fausett, and like you said, we go shop. I mess with Will Booth and them all the time. We go boar shopping out there's what I call it. You ride
Yeah.
around and pick out which track you want to turn loose on, and we're gonna get him up and we're gonna run him.
Yeah.
Here, you pick out whatever damn track is there. Whichever one's there, that's what you got to run if you can find one.
Right.
So how important is the property and your geographical location? Not just the dog, but the property that you have. So apparently you're on the same wavelength there. It's important to have the property with the hogs on it, or you can't catch hogs.
That's right. There's a friend of ours that lives up in Panola County, and I haven't hunted up there on that lease I always talk about. It had so many hogs.
Yes.
It's on the Sabine River, and it's a girl hunts up there, and there's 2 or 3 guys hunts with her and stuff. And a man asked me the other day, he said, "Man," he said, "you seen that on Facebook or wherever it is?" I said, "No, I don't do Facebook." He said, "Man, they catch big hogs every time they go." I said, "Well, they do." I said, "But they're hunting in the Payne Bottom." I said, "They got lots of hogs. Let them bring them dogs that they finding hogs with down there, up yonder."
Yep.
I said, "Let them bring them down here and put them on some of these here hogs."
Yep.
You gotta, and down here, I had a boy told me the other day, "Man, ain't nothing but a sound, a bunch of pigs across the road." I said, "Good."
Yeah.
I said, "That's fine with me. She's got to go somewhere.
Yep.
If they don't go pretty quick, she might run by somebody a little bigger, and, and if it's a landowner, they don't care how many pigs they find dead out there.
That's right.
And it don't really bother me anymore. I'd heard of some of it. I'd heard of dogs. I had a hog get me down one time up in Langle, a big hog, all weighed over 400 pounds.
Oh man.
I didn't get to catch him, but another fella shot him. Well, deer season started, and I didn't get to get. They killed him under a deer feeder with a bow. But me and my brother-in-law went up to Langle. We hunted up there. I fly to Langle, and the guy called me and told me there was a friend of his said that there was a 500-pound hog on his property, and he wished somebody come up there because he'd been trapping some hogs, and he got pictures of him when he'd drive up, running around the trap. And anyway, I told him, we went up there and that's where we just go up there and go hunting, and we never got on the hog. Well, anyway, one Sunday morning, I told my brother-in-law, he hunted with me then, and we hunted horseback and four-wheeler and stuff. I told him, I said, "We ain't gonna take none but young dogs up there." I said, "Cause I think so. I don't want to be killing a bunch of pigs, and stuff." So we knew there was a lot of hogs up there. And anyway, we turned loose. Anyway, went there, I don't know, 150 yards. And, and back then, you didn't, they don't hold no 800 or 900 yards from you. That was in some other town somewhere.
Yeah, why? I mean, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And, it was, I can't, well, you'd be a horse, or I was a horse back then, but, we wound up being, I think it might have been 150, 200 yards, might have been for a truck. Go in there and a hair pig squealing. Well, boy, that made me mad. I caught the dog and whooped her for catching a pig. When my brother-in-law started hollering, he said, "Man, here he is, here he is." His hog had backed up under a pine top. I mean, all you could see was knives sticking out of his mouth. And I said, "Oh, my Lord." I started sending the dogs we had there to him. And anyway, he wouldn't run. He wouldn't run. And we didn't, we had our catch dogs was at the truck. And by that time, we'd done crossed the Angelina River. And anyway, I I told my brother-in-law, I said, look, I said, you're going to have to go back to the truck and get 2 dogs. There's 2 grown, finished, tail cut. We'll get this home. And I said, bring 2 kids dogs. All right. So anyway, I had a lerret rope in my hand, and I said, if I can get a rope on this son, I said, I'll tie him to a tree or something, you know. And anyway, I had a light, an old bleached out Carhartt jacket on, and this old hog, I mean, he did not give a flip. He was laid down. Them dogs were baying him. They'd pinch him. He'd just stand up and look at them, you know. And I'm talking about he was a good, I mean, he was big. And I was standing beside a little sapling. It might have been big 5-inch post here, big one in 5-inch pipe post. And anyway, I was there by ice. I squatted down watching him. And about that time, and there's a wall. I mean, he didn't like humans. He didn't like dogs, but he showed up been like a human. If he could get his eyes on you, he would run you down.
Oh man.
You know, I mean, just wherever you went, he'd go. He come a tree, an old fell down tree. I got a little low that it fell down. He jumped up on the tree trying to get it. He never got up on me. But anyway, I was standing there, and he seen me, and here he come. I said, well, hell, he ain't going to do nothing. Wolf at me and go on by, you know. I said, I'll wait for Danny to get here, you know. And I jumped up that tree. Well, when I did, one of them dogs pinched him. And what did he do? He turned around on the tree that I was on. And I wasn't quite up high enough. And his butt hit my feet.
Mm.
When his butt hit my feet, he spun. And when he did, he took my feet off that tree.
Oh hell.
And I didn't know but one thing to do. And that was turn her loose and scream and holler. So anyway, I landed on the ground. He got on top of me. And I was just screaming and hollering and kicking. And I just knew, I said, man, I'm cut off pieces. And finally a dog pinched him and he got off of me. And I just laid there. And I was in a bunch of honeysuckle. And I laid there on the ground for a few minutes. And I could feel my legs were wet. I said, I know I'm bleeding, you know. And I finally got up and I started hollering for my brother-in-law. And I got up and I kept looking. And I said, he didn't cut me.
Huh.
He had got on me and he peed all over me.
Oh hell.
I mean, he peed all over me. He was trying to cut me, but them dogs was working on him so hard, he couldn't. Anyway, I got to look at my brother-in-law. I could see him. I started hollering, where's the other dogs? Well, I got to looking. He was on a stump about 150 yards from me.
Oh.
And anyway, he never went and got no dogs. We wound up, the hog went on, and the dog bait again. We thought he had him bait, but didn't have a sow bait. We caught the sow. Anyway, tied her up, got her out. She was on the other side of the end of the west, go across on the bridge and come back up. Anyway, we started home. And I mean, I stunk. Lord have mercy, I stunk. And my brother-in-law, he's standing there. He's watching all this.
Oh,
you know?
I'd had to fire his ass.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, he got talking to me. He got talking pretty good.
I
But
bet.
anyway, we got up there and we started home, and he said, and which Pam, my wife, his sister, he said, where is Jeremy didn't go with us that day for some reason, but he said, where is Pam and Cassie and Jeremy? I said, they went to church this morning. He said, well, I'm going to tell you something. When you get home, you need to put your suit on and go get with them. He said, because you ain't supposed to be here this morning. And but they finally shot the hog. And matter of fact, one of the dogs, he cut a shoulder plumb off of one of the dogs that belonged to my brother-in-law. And I think that done got him kind of shell-shocked in.
Oh, I bet.
You know? But Anyway,
That's a lot of hog right there.
yeah.
And anytime, it don't matter how big a hog is when it gets on you. I mean, I had a little old 60-pound shoat whoop me one day, cut my boots off of him. We laugh and joke about it now, but if it had been 160 pounds, if the same thing happened, I'd been bad shape. You know, much less you get something that's 200 or 300 or bigger.
Oh yeah. We had
Well, shit. All right, let me call him back. See if we can straighten that out. I don't know what in the world happened.
Your call has been.
Well, hell. I don't know, folks. It was some weird noises there. Them aliens might have abducted him. If he had plot hounds, they probably didn't want him to get rid of him. There he is, calling me back. Lord have mercy. Hello.
anyway.
There you go.
I guess it quit. I don't know.
I don't know what in the world. I said, well, I guess some aliens have done abducted him. Is what it sounded like.
Someone shorted out, I guess.
Oh, that's fine. Continue on.
Anyway, we went down there and caught this hog. We bait up. We was fixing to leave, and we was getting over a barbed wire fence, and the dogs bayed, and this was this was in the 70s, and we was a mule bet. We was riding mules, and anyway, and the buddy that was with me, you talking about foreign somebody, this old boy, he
what in the world is going on?
You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
That gummit thing quit on me.
I don't know what in the world that is.
Anyway, we caught. I said, "You talking about somebody foreign? Somebody?
Oh, yeah.
He's a scared devil hog. He always told me, man, I'll catch all the dogs. Just don't depend on me to help you catch a hog." But we caught this hog, and an old tree had failed, and that hog was laying behind it in the roots, laying up where the roots had pulled up out of the ground. And anyway, we was watching the hogs, and this is a true story. We was watching the dogs bay the hog, and he's pretty tough old hog. He wasn't a great big hog. He weighed 156, but he was old. And anyway, the dogs was baying him, and when they did, well, I was standing there at the roots looking around at the dogs, and this guy stepped in between me and the roots and was looking. And about that time, that hog spun around. When he did, he come at us. And when he did, old Shot, his old boy's name, they called him Shot Lynch. He broke and run. Anyway, I stood there and anyway, went back around there looking. And when I did, I heard him. He hollered. He said, Jim. I said, what? He said, would you look down there between your feet? I run plumb out of my boots when I left a while ago. And he run plumb out of his shoes. He left me sitting there. And anyway, I told him, I said, go get the gun, Shot. We'll shoot this one. And anyway, he did. But it took him a little longer, and he said, he smoked cigarettes real bad. He said, Jim, I hope you ain't mad at me. He said, man, I had to stop and smoke a cigarette on the way out there to get that gun.
Calm his
And
nerves.
we got up there, and we got up on the bank. And I finally told him, I said, put the gun down. I said, we fixed to tie him up. And we did. We threw a rope over him. I finally got a hold to him, got a rope on him over them roots, got a rope on him, tied him up. And what was funny is that other guy had come in there to help us. His name was Bo Reynolds, I believe his name. And he come in there, big old boy. And I told him, I said, y'all hold him and I'll tie him up. Well, anyway, they kept, Shot said, "Hey, Jim," he said, "man," he said, "I ain't rushing you now." He said, "But man, these far ain'ts are eating us up." I said, "They gonna have to eat you up because I ain't got him tied yet." But anyway, we got him tied and brought him in. And I told him, I said, "If them dogs are gonna do this good a job, I'm gonna catch him and tie him up." So that's what we did.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
anyway, what time is it?
I was fixing to say we've got enough in here for a good episode. We've got almost 2 hours in.
Okay.
But I mean, like I said, if you're good with it, I'm fine with it right now. But I'd still like to talk to you some more. Maybe later on, do another episode and continue on with some more stories and stuff. Man, this is the stuff that a lot of guys my age, we started hunting and we were just when the tracking systems were starting to get big and hogs were starting to run and all that. So we remember some of the stuff like you lived, and then some of these newer guys, these younger guys, they don't know nothing about it, and you'd be so surprised, Mr. Fausett, how many of these guys that are hunting right now, they're not from a hunting family. They really don't know shit about it. And this is how they're learning. And my hat's off to them because it's a hard lesson to learn. A lot of it is. But we got a lot of folks out here now like yourself that's willing to talk and discuss some of these things and give them some good stories. Like you talking about a hog getting you down. Some of these boys don't believe that can happen. Well,
that's right.
By God, it can. So, but
and I told them after that, I said, I ain't scared of them, but I sure enough got a lot more respect for them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can't be scared of them, but you damn sure better respect them. Ain't no doubt about that. Well, Mr. Jim, we really appreciate you taking time out and talking with us. I'm
sorry we missed all them other times. But
no, that's just life.
My memory ain't good as it used to be. And I'd fool around and I was jumping through my butt yesterday and thinking Roper had called me. I told him, I said, "Roper, you text me 2 or 3 times. You make sure that I remember because I'll be done forgot. I get off a day or two. Usually if I'm down there sitting at that oil well, at that gas well at that location down there, I ain't got, that'd be that would make a day go better,
Sir. Yes, sir.
But the other day I kept telling Roper, I said, "If you'll call me and text me and let me know," I said, "cause I'll fool around and forget it." And last night I told my wife, I said, "Oh Lord, I've done stood these boys up again."
No.
She said, "What time is it?" I said, "Man, it's 7 o'clock." I said, so I text, I didn't see nothing on my phone. So I knew y'all hadn't called or texted me.
Yes, sir.
And I said, well, surely somebody would have. And so finally this morning, Roper calls me this morning.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I said, well, I'm glad. I said, I couldn't sleep last night. I'm afraid I'd done told them boys a lie.
Nah, we appreciate it, man. It ain't no problem at all. You're a working fella. You got shit to do. And we're the same way. So there's some days we can't get nothing done except what we're doing outside of this part of life,
Right. Well, how you was talking about y'all's age? How old are y'all?
I'm fixing to be 50.
Fixing to be 50.
Yeah, knocking on 50. My son is 25, and all the boys that I hunted with that got me started hunting with hogs. I've been around dogs all my life,
right?
Around hunting dogs, different forms and fashions. Came from the game dog world with bulldogs,
right.
generations. Right. My grandfather, my dad, and all of them. But anyway, so that all of them are about the same age. Some of them's a little older. They're probably in their 60s now. And some, the youngest one is probably 45.
Yeah.
So, like I said, a lot of the stuff that when we started out, there was nobody around here doing it.
Right.
There was one guy, Mr. Charlie, and we call him Frog. And back then, man, I ain't gonna lie to you. You couldn't talk to him, really get a hold of him. And, there wasn't no social media stuff going on then, wasn't all that. And of course it was tough to get properties, but when you got properties, we had big properties.
Yeah.
Well, come along after I hunted for several years, they made it illegal for us to have a live hog. And we couldn't. Well, they started out you couldn't transport. Now they got it where you can't have a live hog at all. If the rule says upon capture, they must be dispatched.
Right.
So we just don't catch a whole lot of hogs, but them dogs might bay them for a while.
Yeah.
You know, I might go in there and just call them dogs and tell them load up and get out of there and leave them hogs alone.
Yeah.
But they sure in the hell run now, though. My gosh.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a whole different deal.
Yeah, it's completely different.
But it was something I was going to ask you in a well, heck, I done slipped my mind now. But anyway, yeah, y'all give me a call and I'll get up with me and we'll try to, you know.
Yeah,
we'll do
it again, definitely. But like I said, I appreciate you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
You have a good night.
Yes, sir, and y'all do the same.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fausett. We'll see you, buddy.
Yes, sir.
All right, bye-bye. Well, boys and girls, dude, that was awesome. Sweet, that was awesome. I mean, you know, hearing the stories and stuff like that, a lot of guys, I don't know how to explain. Well, a lot of them, they just kind of lock up, especially the older guys. Once they get in their 70s and stuff, when you put them on the spot and say, hey, tell us about this. Now, if you're sitting around a fire drinking beer or just shooting shit or something like that, well, they can ramble on. But when they get on that microphone or a camera in front of them, they kind of tone it down. And a lot of that goes back to product of your environment. Most of them were always taught, you know, you don't put your business out there. You don't discuss a lot of things openly. But having these guys like Mr. Fausett come on here and like, this is literally this is the only way you can get all these old stories out. You can hear them from other people over and over again. I can tell you the same story he told me, but it'll never be the same as him telling it. So what we're doing is like, we're putting the annals of history down right now. That's the way I'm like to thinking of it is, you know, I'm just a dumbass old country boy that likes talking about dogs and hunting and life in general. And I'm so thankful and so blessed from our good Lord above to be able to do this. And I get to do this, you know, thanks to all you listeners out there. That gives me fuel for the fire to keep going. Because if wasn't nobody listening, I mean, I'd probably still be talking. Ain't no doubt. Everybody knows I don't really say a whole lot, you know. But you guys, we really appreciate y'all out there listening. Y'all make sure to pay attention to our ads and stuff that we do. These are the people that are helping us take this thing to the next level. There's quite a few of them now. Also, remember, you know, you want to get your essentials, get your nutrients and stuff for your dogs and your supplements. Y'all holler at 777. They'll fix you up with the K9 Essentials and get that cut gear. Make sure you use Dixie Doggers as a discount code from Southern Cross Cut Gear. The best there is. So, hey, man, we appreciate y'all. Thank y'all. Until the next time, we'll see you.
Hope you enjoyed that episode. If there's anything or anyone you'd like to hear on the podcast, or if you'd like to come hunt with us, don't hesitate to contact us at dixiedoggers01@gmail.com.